Thank you, Ann.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Something I wanted to mention. Spoke with Andy Gibbs today. They're locked down again. Apparently, they've had some more COVID difficulties, so it's really hard to understand detail on the phone with Andy, but he's locked down, so you can't take him a Frosty.
Cool.
We usually do about once a week, and that way we get a Frosty too. Anyway, keep it in mind.
Yeah, I'm so sad to hear that. Yeah, I found out about someone today who just got a new diagnosis of being COVID positive and who's vaccinated and stuff. It's so hard for that person, their family, but their workplaces and the ripple effects of this, like whoever has COVID in Andy's facility, then the whole facility locks down. And it's just it's what's so hard about the schools. I mean, everything about this pandemic. So thanks for mentioning that and keep him in mind. So tonight we are, I'm not as much sort of teaching or facilitating as kind of just guiding a conversation for us.
Okay, well, sure helped.
We've lost you,
we have gifts, whether we think we do or not. And that those gifts are, can you all hear me? I'm getting a signal that
you stalled out for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, you freeze up.
Froze. Yeah, you froze.
I think we've all had that happen. Are you froze? I think.
Yeah, that's
Hands frozen again.
Yeah, I don't know if it's us or her or just the geeks
you're frozen.
taking over.
Are you all there? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Now.
We're
Keep freezing. Keep freezing up, man.
Sorry about that. I know. I'm at the church. I just switched networks. We have several internet networks or possibilities at the church. So I just switched. If I start freezing up again, I'll go to a hotspot on my phone. But okay, but we're good right now. You can hear me. So Alice gave a great sermon, I thought, reminding us all that we have gifts and that they are of the Spirit. And I mean, I think sometimes or often we need to be remembered. We need to be reminded. Sorry, not remembered. Remembered and reminded. But we need to be reminded that even the littlest things that we do, bringing a Frosty to Andy, those are gifts that we offer the world. And that's how we feel God in the world, I think, right? That's how we understand God's love is through how we share what we can share. And sometimes those things are more elusive and sometimes they're more tangible. But tonight, I just wanted to start by sharing a little bit about this phrase, what it means to follow Christ. Because it's kind of churchy language, I've decided to follow Jesus or making a profession of faith. But this whole series of freedom, we kind of started at this top level of what the Bible says about freedom among Baptists. And we've looked at our, American Baptist, sisters and brothers in other churches and what that means to be affiliated with them, but really drilling down now to the freedom we have as individuals to follow Christ, to follow Jesus, to make that choice. Because it is a choice. It's not something that we're coerced to do in this country. It's not something God coerces us to do, or certainly I hope you don't feel coerced by me. If you do, we'll talk about that. That's a bigger issue. But that we have this freedom to follow Jesus. But, sometimes I think we struggle to know what that means, even after we make a decision to say, I want to follow Jesus. So I kind of have a two-part question for you all. But first, I just want to acknowledge that when Jesus called his first disciples, he just said, "Follow me," right? He didn't say, "Let me check out this resume here on how good of a fish catch have you had the last 3 months." And who know? We don't know a lot about all these years between when Jesus was like 12 years old until he was 30-ish. But so he might have been scouting these guys out for a while. I don't know. Or maybe he had some kind of vision when he was in the desert after he was baptized and that said, these are the first 12 people you see, you need to call them to follow you. But essentially, the message we get in scripture, in the gospels of Jesus saying, "Come and follow me," is that these people say, "Okay," and they drop their nets, and we really don't know their credentials. Jesus doesn't know their credentials. And I would venture to say they are certainly not following Jesus based on their spiritual credentials or like that they are some experts in the faith, right? Because we see time and time again that the disciples question Jesus. They don't understand, they struggle. So in a lot of ways, Jesus calls people around him who have a lot of different skill sets, people who've like Matthew, who were tax collectors, or people who were fishermen, some of which we don't really know what their profession was. And that we don't, it's not like they were proven to be special, I don't know, scholars in the temple, so to speak. It's not quite the same way we might gather a church staff around us now. If we're going to hire a new pastor, I kind of look at what seminary they went to and I see, do they have some experience? And that's just not how Jesus did it. So I just want to hold that out, as an opening statement with that. But I'm just curious as to if any of you have a memory or a story that you're willing to share about when you first had a concept of what it might mean to follow Jesus and or made a decision to quote unquote follow Jesus. And I'll let you interpret that however you want. But does anybody have a clear moment or memory or story around that in your life?
Well, I've shared this before, I think, and I remember when my dad took me to my granddad's office. He was the pastor of the First Baptist Church of Edmond, Oklahoma, my grandfather. And they sat me down in front of this roll-top desk about the size of a 48 Buick and said, "We've determined that it's time for you to take action on this decision we've made for you." Not in those words, but that's kind of the way it seemed. So I was baptized, just decided to follow Jesus, but it has taken 60 some odd years plus to try to figure out what that means and try to do it the way I think I should. So I can't give you a moment. There are times when I can tell I'm on the right path, and there are times when I know I'm not on the right path. But I can't give you a moment.
Thank you, Carl.
I think when I was at Bible camp, but for the first time, and we were, there. I think that was about, yeah, and I was probably about 14 years old then, something like that.
So it was a camp experience for you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Joanne. Anybody else have a concept of that term early on? Christine?
Yes, I was thinking all my young years growing up, I always heard from my mother, that we were following Jesus, and this is a good thing. This probably isn't a good thing. Jesus wouldn't do this. And everything that we did was because it was a good thing. And then when I was 9 or 10 years old, the church that we went to was asking upper level, elementary level children if they would like to come to the pastor's class. And my mom and I talked about it, and suddenly it registered to me that I would no longer be under the tutelage and umbrella of my mother. I would be responsible for me personally following Jesus. And nobody said that. It's just something that was important to me to realize. So
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's an important kind of revelation though, because it talks about, it sort of like relates to that freedom piece of you realizing there was a distinction between your mother kind of encouraging faith and you knowing that you're making a decision. Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else? Do you, for those who may not have had a clear, like, maybe moment with that phrase, or maybe come from a tradition where that phrase of deciding to follow Jesus is not as like used, right? Because in different traditions, that's a very kind of Baptist thing, I think, to say. As adults, do you have a different understanding or a more nuanced understanding of what that means, perhaps than maybe what you were taught as a child? Or if you were not taught to follow Jesus, like as a child, in the sense of I need to make a personal decision, at what point did you realize that you had a freedom to make a decision? Meaning, oh, I have a freedom to not just be a lifelong Catholic or to not just be someone who attends this church, but I have a choice in my faith. Have any of you had like a moment like that where you can kind of name where you had a revelation that this is not just like your family's religion, but it's something that you can own or claim?
I would say when I was in the military, we, they had about everybody, but I didn't go to the church that I was raised in, the Lutheran church. I went to the one that was a non-denominational church. And that's what I decided to do. From then on, that's what I was gonna do is like the Christian church, and that's about why I'm staying with the Baptist, because I consider the Baptist about like the Christian church.
It is interesting, Joanne, like you being in the military, often those times in our life where we're exposed to more traditions, like the different than what we were raised in, is when we start to realize, oh, I do have a choice in this, or I could choose to be this or that. So that's good. Yeah. Lori Burt, put your hand up.
I think that exact thing happened to me when I went to college, because I'd been raised in a very strict Catholic home. And when I went to college, I had all these friends, and they would go to the, so-and-so student union and come to my church this week. And I felt that real freedom to be able to do that and to be exposed to different things. And it really opened my eyes, because my mother sort of engendered in us the fact that faith was a very personal thing and you just don't talk about it. And all of a sudden, all these friends were saying, well, I have this personal relationship with Jesus. And it was so refreshing and interesting. And I think that really set me on the path for looking for what I wanted to commit to, what I wanted to follow, as opposed to just the fact that, well, you were born Catholic, well, you're going to be Catholic, you know.
Mhm. Yeah. Thanks, Lori.
I think to some extent, when I was married to my first husband, even though we had grown up in the same small Methodist church, he was not particularly interested in going to church, and I was. And the fact that I chose to do that some, and he went with me some, was sort of a, no, this is something I grew up with and I want to keep it, I want to develop it. And then that became more important when my son was about 3 or 4, and I thought, if I want to raise him to at least know about God, I better be connecting with the church. And that's how I ended up coming to Calvary. Was and again, that was an individual decision rather than one from my family of origin or a household decision.
Yeah. Judy Goldman. Yeah.
I guess first moving around all my life, going to various churches. I guess the first time I ever got to choose which church I was going to go to was when we moved to Colorado Springs. And I was baptized in the Presbyterian church, but Mom decided that I could pick which church we were going to go to in the Springs. And so, of course, I went to the Presbyterian church first, but I didn't care for it. I've always picked my churches according to the pastors and the congregation, sort of, because I've always been shy. It's always been a matter of comfort, I guess, for me. Anyway, so then I went to the First Baptist Church in the Springs, and that's where I decided to go. And luckily, I mean, they had a very active youth group. Anyway, so that's probably the first time I ever actually picked a church. Well, in college, obviously, I picked what church I was going to go to. But other than that, anyway. And actually, well, I'll tell you guys a story if you've never heard it. It may be surprising that I ever went to church at all, because when we lived in Virginia, we were going to the Presbyterian church where I was actually baptized. And first day of Bible school, I broke my nose. So in a way, it's amazing that I ever went back to church and got baptized at all.
That's funny. Yeah, I think it's interesting that many of us have a very strong connection between how we understand following Jesus with the church we attend and the connection we have to church. Because I think it speaks very strongly, to the need for community in following Jesus, because it's a very hard thing to do on our own. And I think, even though Jesus did not start churches, that was Paul's thing. Jesus did call people around him, those 12 disciples, called people around him to do ministry. So he was not in it alone, and then of course we see Paul start these churches and the disciples try to start communities. And so sometimes I hear people say, well, but following Jesus is this personal thing that it's not about like what church you're a part of. And I'm like, I don't know that it's that, you can't parse it out that neatly. I think the two can be very intertwined, and I think they can be two separate things, but I think there can be a very strong connection there. And I know for me, a moment in my sort of journey where I had I came to a new understanding of what it means to quote unquote follow Jesus is when I realized that Jesus is kind of following me. So I needed to stop worrying about whether or not I was following Jesus. And I was so worried when I was trying to decide what graduate school to go to, what divinity school, that I was going to pick the wrong choice. I already had all kinds of issues of, is God calling me to ministry? I don't know. I don't think so, because I really don't believe in God right now. Like, I had all this stuff going on, and all these faith like struggles. And I was really worried about what school to go to, because I knew how formative that would be. And I was just thinking about the future. And I thought, if there's a clear way, God will show me the way. And some of you've heard the story before. So I was just going to let, I'll let scholarships determine it. Whichever school I get a scholarship to, because seminary is expensive. So I'll just take that as my sign from God. Well, I mean, as joke was on me, because I got a full ride to these three different schools. And I was like, that's not fair. I mean, it was great news, but I was like, I don't know. And I was agonizing, and I was in my pastor's office saying, I don't know what school to go to. I had pros and cons lists, and the whole thing. And he finally said, Anne, God is going to be with you, whatever school you go to. Like, these are all good choices. Like, this is, in other words, you can't pick a wrong school. And in the same way, he was kind of trying to say, seminary is what you make of it. It doesn't matter the name of the seminary. I mean, you can make it can be a good experience or a bad experience. But what clicked for me is this idea of like, wherever I go, God is. Because sometimes I get so worried about like following God in the right direction. Like, am I supposed to go to Calvary to be their pastor? Or am I supposed to go to a different church? Like, I went through all of that again when I was determining whether or not, when I was interviewing at Calvary 12, 13 years ago. So when I really realized that no matter where I go, God is with me. And so part of following Jesus, I think, is kind of relaxing into that knowledge to know that God is with us, versus there just being one path, that like, I'm supposed to do A, B, and C, and that's the way to go. When in reality, if I veer off to like G, instead of going A, B, C, it's probably going to be okay. So I just share that as an example of like, as we mature and grow, I think following Jesus is we realize it's very hard work to follow, to live as Jesus lives, to follow these seemingly simple commands of love God, love others. But the older we get and the more complex it can feel, I also think we can kind of relax into the knowledge to know that there's a lot of grace there as well. And I want to segue into this idea about our gifts and how we use our gifts, because Alice brought up something very important, that sometimes we don't know the gifts that we have, or we don't recognize them, or we think they're not enough, or they're not. Probably a more accurate thing is we just don't even know that we don't know that they're gifts. We just think that, oh, this is me. This is who I am. It's my personality, or it's my, and I read something that said, like, when it comes to the gifts that we have to share. And when I say that word gifts, I'm meaning, in that Corinthians passage that we read on Sunday, Paul lists all these gifts like prophecy and teaching and wisdom and the gift of caring for others. And essentially he's looking at the church at Corinth and seeing the gifts that he sees and naming them. And Alice did a good job of saying, these were the gifts from, back then, those times. We can kind of modernize those now. But so that's what I mean when I use the word gifts. I don't mean like a package with a bow on it. Although that could be, it could be a package with a bow. But when we think about the different gifts and skills that we have, sometimes there's like 4 different phases they can be in. They can be in a phase of like, we're readily sharing that gift with others. For instance, I would say I readily share the gift of preaching at Calvary. Now you could argue as to whether that's even a gift I have, but I preach nonetheless. So I'm actively sharing that gift. Then there's gifts that are like renewing. Maybe we had them in an earlier season of our life, and then stuff started happening in our lives that we didn't get to tap into those as much. And now we're rediscovering them. And I see this a lot actually with people at Calvary who go through a major life transition, whether that's retirement and they have more time, whether that's the death of a spouse, a partner, or they've been a caregiver and now they're in a different season. And so you might have a sense of like something from your past that you're kind of picking up again or renewing or brushing off, a new skill. And then developing would be like a brand new thing, maybe that you're trying. And I think of that a lot of times. Maybe someone signs up to help with Family Promise for the first time. They've never done it. And it's kind of scary to think about sleeping at the church overnight or whatever it is. That's a developing gift, right? It's something you've never tried. And then there's outright refusing. Like, nope, not doing that. Don't have that gift. Which we also do. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. Sometimes we know our limitations and we refuse because we say either that's not me, or somebody else can do that better, or that's just not me right now in this season of life. So as you think about things, I invite you to think in a framework that allows for flexibility, because sometimes we get pigeonholed into like, well, and we know this is really popular in the church. So-and-so is good with numbers, so they're going to be on the finance committee, and then they stay on the finance committee forever. So that's just a framework I offer you as you think about your own gifts. But what I want to do is I'm going to use the chat here, and I want to spend some time. I want you all to think about the people of Calvary, because when Paul was naming gifts, he was naming gifts he saw in a local church. And I want you to think, and you don't need to attach these gifts to people, but I want you just to say lists of gifts in kind of a modern language, right? We might not say prophecy or speaking in tongues, but what are the gifts that you see present in our congregation? And I'm just going to put them in the chat box as you call them out, popcorn style.
Prayer.
Getting things done.
Okay.
Just putting a thing together and getting it done.
Sharon, what did you say?
Prayer.
Prayer.
There are certain people that I think are prayer warriors.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mike Burke was one of those, for sure. Thinking about him, Lori, yeah.
Teaching.
Teaching. Mm-hmm. Is that what you both said, Nancy and Carl? Teaching? Okay.
The music.
Musical gifts.
Encouragers.
Mm-hmm.
Missions.
Listeners, people that listen, are good listeners.
Mm-hmm.
Office workers.
Amen.
Yeah.
Fixing things.
Fixing things.
Cleaning things.
Yes. Cleaning things. I would say leading meetings. Some people have a real gift for that.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah. Karen, you're very good with Robert's rules. People who, it takes a lot of skill to do that. So giving, Estella and Dan wrote giving. Yes. Generosity. Humor would be one. Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Is that it? Is that our comprehensive list?
Oh, I don't think so, but
Getting things done, prayer, teaching, musical gifts, encouragers, missions, listeners, office workers, fixing things, cleaning things, leading meetings, giving, humor, cooking for others, compassion. That's from me. Yeah.
I think I would say there are people that work behind the scenes,
Mm-hmm.
humble workers. I don't know what you call them.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there are people who at certain times challenge the status quo and encourage us to look at doing something different.
Right. Mm-hmm. Which is a gift for sure. Prophets. Yeah, Estella and Dan, people who can speak prophetically. It's kind of like challenging the status quo, but in a different way. I think there are, I don't know how to say this exactly, but like includers, which is different, I think, than welcoming. I think a lot of people at which is a gift, I'll write that down, welcoming, hospitality. But I'm trying to see if I'm spelling things correctly. People have the gift of welcoming and hospitality, but including, I think, is, there are those people who know how to intentionally say, I'm going to go sit by this person because I don't see someone sitting by them, or make sure they have an order of worship, or just make sure they know where something is, or I've noticed they didn't speak in Bible study, so I'm just going to check on them. So people, I think, at Calvary have that gift as well. Okay, it's a pretty good list. I think we probably have more than that, but we'll settle on that. I think this is a good list.
Writer. Good writer.
Writer, that's a great one. Writers. Public speakers. We have a lot of good public speakers. We see that every week in worship. Storytellers. Think about that too. Their word for God's. And Christine, you told a great story at council the other night. Teachers, Mimi Leonard, yep. Artists, yeah, I was going to say crafty, and then I realized crafty might sound like the serpent or something. But crafty as in, yes, creative.
Creative, yeah.
Yep. And I'll put numbers people as well, like financial people. Good. Okay, so thinking about all of those gifts that everybody has in our church, I want to kind of then pare it down to these faces you see on the screen tonight. And I'm going to ask us to do something that might be kind of vulnerable, but I was part of and Lori Burke, you were in this group with us. Do you remember when we were in Companions in Christ? And
yes.
we did something where we basically, I think we had note cards, but we wrote down the gifts that we see in one another, and it was fascinating to me because I think that we often don't even know the things that people are noticing about us, or the things that that we do that might be considered a gift. For instance, Carl taking a Frosty and Arlene taking a Frosty to Andy. That's just it's an amazing gift of time, of friendship, of care, but we don't always think about those things in that way. And so we all, we've been together, most of us on the screen, on and off, I don't know, through a pandemic. So we've gotten to know each other a little bit. And even if there are people on this screen you don't know, I would venture to say that just by signing on tonight, we've all offered the gift of our presence, right? Of engaging, wanting to show up and be here tonight for whatever reason. And we've offered the gift of listening to each other as we've shared prayer requests and praises. So I want to spend our last few minutes being intentional about naming the gifts of other people on this screen that we see and that we want to acknowledge as a way of affirming one another. And if you don't know someone, I'm not going to call on you, so don't start freaking out. But I hope that many of you will participate. And it can be very little things. You may not know someone well, but maybe they've said something or they've shown up or you've noticed something. So I'll start us just with a couple, and then we can just popcorn in as you feel led. Yes, Judy. Mm-hmm.
Oh, you want to add to the list the gift of technology?
That is Morgan.
Huge.
Morgan has that gift. We can all affirm that with her. Yes. So I'll just start us off and say, Mimi, I'm always encouraged by the gift of your smile and your presence, but the enthusiasm at Alice's baby shower that you led those songs from our childhood, like I've got the joy, 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 joy. And your spirit when you sing in the choir, your smile communicates so much of just wanting to be here and being joyful. And I'm sure there are days you don't feel that way, but it's such a gift. So I just want you to know that you have that gift of exuberance, maybe. I don't know. Is that a gift?
Thank you very much. That's nice. Thank you.
Yes, amen to that.
I can second that.
Yeah.
To Sharon Grimes, you see, you're still Sharon Grimes to me. Sharon Murphy,
It's okay, I answer to any of it.
Sharon Grimes forever. To Sharon Murphy, when I first met you, I was intimidated by you. Here is this woman who's an attorney, and you and I taught a middle school Sunday school class one Sunday, and we had such a good time, and you were so down to earth. And from then on, I have also used you as an attorney, and you are so smart and so genuine and so a good counselor. And I've never said that. And so now I have.
I second that.
Yeah, third,
I would add lifesaver.
Mm.
Yay, Sharon.
Thank you, thank you.
I haven't experienced Christine's class on Tuesday morning, but what little I have heard and experienced with Christine, she always has the right words for what needs to be said at any given time. And I think that's really a gift.
And Christine, I love your enthusiasm. You talk about enthusiasm. You just radiate all the time. And I'm always just love seeing your face because of that. You're such a light. And Carl, I really appreciate your sense of humor.
Absolutely.
And Joanne, when you and I were in the same ABWM circle, I appreciated the way that you could ask a very direct question that cut through to the heart of the matter without all of the soft fuzzy around it.
Really? Thank you.
And I would add to that, Joanne, when you were in our Tuesday Bible study group, you can do exactly what Sharon just said. And then also you have the ability to just bring a tenderness to the people of the world that are on your heart, whether it's your friend, James, who's in the hospital, or whether it's the people in the path of Hurricane Ida, like you did tonight. So I appreciate your empathy and compassion for people who are suffering, and for always reminding us of that. So.
Well, thank you.
Well, I'd like to say for Erlene, she was the embracer of love and welcoming for Mike and me when the very first Sunday we came to church. And you've always been a gracious person. And I appreciate that. You really make people feel important and cared for.
I actually would say the same of you, Lori. I think you do that very well also. And you are very giving, you're very present, always very in the moment, always available. So I would say the same thing for you.
Thank you.
I was going to compliment Erlene in public on her gift of caregiving. When we lived in Texas, and Brenda was about that tall, Erlene used to visit the nursing home weekly, sometimes a couple of times a week. And she would always take Brenda with her because the little old ladies just loved that cute little girl. And Erlene has always been a caregiver, a grief expert, many conferences, Stephen Ministry and all that. Now, and she still does those things, or did, until we both kind of got lazy. but she still takes pretty good care of me. And, I think that's part of the reason Brenda is a chaplain.
Mm.
Well, and what can we say about Nancy? Nancy, who I don't even know how to describe it. She's so caring, and her projects for caring for the homeless and caring with Family Promise. I've worked with her in Family Promise and Bootstraps and I've worked with her in Bootstraps and Blessings, but I've worked with her in Family Promise, and she's just always so giving. Fun to be around. And now she's joined our game day. I think she's having a lot of fun. So hopefully. And I'd also like to say something about Christine, because when Christine was teaching Bible study, I was new to the Bible study group, so I never felt like I really got to know her that well before she moved away. But now, long distance, she's because I'm one of these people that opens up my big mouth about how I feel about things. I think I get in trouble sometimes, but Christine's always been very supportive of whatever I say. And I really, really appreciate that.
And thank you, Judy. And I do have fun at game day thanks to you, because you're organizing it and keeping it going. So thank you.
To say something about Daniel, I never had a chance to go to Sunday school all the years that I was working with the children. And when Calvary went on Zoom and Daniel started teaching Caritas on Zoom, and so I started going, and he's an amazing teacher. And the homework that he must do to put those classes together takes more than 5 minutes, and all the lessons, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you, Daniel.
I would agree with you, Christine, not from Caritas, but for example, I was not on some of the early ones on Tuesday night, because Tuesday night doesn't always work for me, but I went back and watched some, and I watched the one that Daniel did, and I thought, this is interesting. And he's holding my attention. And it's presenting it from both a personal standpoint and a more professional standpoint. And so the presentation hooked me in.
Daniel, you ask really good questions, Daniel, I think, that help broaden our worldview and perspective. So I appreciate that about your teaching, for sure.
Are we allowed to say something about our pastors?
You are. Yes.
Well, the one who just took a sip of coffee, I'm so glad she's back, and all of the connections and the community work that Morgan has brought an interest to Calvary over the, 5 years, 6 years, 5 years?
7.
7. Oh, time flies. Yeah, it really, I think, stretches us and has been a good thing. And of course, and when you were being presented, I heard you talk at one of the meetings, and I rarely at the time would stand up and say anything, but I felt like I had to say, I would, even though I could be your grandmother in age, I would sit at your feet and feel like I could learn. And I still feel that.
Yes.
Thank you, Nancy. I feel that affirmation for sure.
So, Anne, I
yes.
have to call you a creative leader, especially during the pandemic. I think that a lot of my friends that go to different churches, they said everything sort of fizzled during the pandemic. And I said, oh no, not my church. And, you know, that was your leadership. And of course, Morgan's and Alice's and David's and everybody's. But you are an extraordinary leader during difficult times, I think. And I hope you see that as one of your gifts.
Thank you, Lori. That's what I would call
On
a
difficult times?
a developed gift at Calvary. So
A developed gift. Morgan, your gift for me has always been, you are a demonstrator of the art of play in life. You make me happy every time because you've showed me how to play more.
Oh, thank you.
And we need that.
Thank you. I was going to add on to what you were saying about Anne, Lori, in difficult times, funerals, and I know you hear this a lot, boss, like you do funerals well. But like there's something to be said, and she's frozen, so I don't know if she can hear this. But there's something to be said for holding space. And I think the congregation really gets to see you hold that space during funerals. As a colleague, I get to see all the spaces you hold at large. Christine, your ability to be present in the live chat is a gift. And it is a digital manifestation of how you embody that when you're physically present with people. Nancy, you have the ability to make anyone feel like your family. And it is a beautiful space that you create. Lori, you have, if the spirit could be manifested as a gentle strength, it would be you. And Judy Goldman, you have the ability, like if the spirit of God could do a flash dance in like flash mob style, it would be you, because you randomly come up with stuff that just makes everybody join in and you're like, yep, I don't know where we're going, but let's go with it. And it is fantastic. Sharon, you have a presence in such a way that allows people to lean in. There is a curiosity that you provoke in others because you disarm them with grace and love. The Raimies, I haven't been here for 3 months, so I'm taking time. Raimies, you are the folks who are steadfast. Like if you could like have somebody describe steadfastness, it would be the two of you, not just for each other, but for those around you. Mimi, when I think of joy embodied, it is you. There is a beautiful just joy that radiates from you and invites others to have authentic joy, not just happiness, right? And Daniel, the way you invite people to learn, and I know it was said earlier, but there's a difference between learning and then you invite others to explore their own learning. I hear how like when they've been in your class, they're like, oh, I thought of this and I want to go learn more about it. So you spark learning beyond what they've gleaned from you. And I am just grateful for all of you. And I know we're over time, but again, I haven't been here and I don't know the rules. So there you go.
So it was a great way to end us, Morgan, going around one by one. And just give a shout out to Morgan, her first Sunday back from parental leave. I'm sure she's got all these thoughts in her mind. And she comes down to my office with a cup of Starbucks coffee. She's amazing. Just like Alice said, there are people who know what you need when you don't even ask. That's Morgan. So, and I want to give a shout out to Erlene Ramey's pies. That is a spiritual gift, the pies that you make. So thank you for those. I think I'm probably freezing up on and off again. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to encourage you all, if you still can hear me, I'll at least talk as we finish up. I hope you feel good right now, because it's good to be affirmed. It's good to hear what other people see in you. It's good to acknowledge what other people around you are gifting the world with. So I just want to encourage you in your families and your small groups, when you have the chance, just to call out these gifts and to tell people, because I think it makes a difference. You know, it lifts our spirits. And it's important to be reminded that we do have things to offer. So I will leave you with that. I think we've kind of blessed each other along the way, and I encourage you to share the blessing you've received with others who are not on this screen, who you come across this week. So, and until, I guess, Sunday, when I see some of you next, or maybe before or after then. So we'll say goodbye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ann.
Thanks.
Even though we only heard about half of every fourth word, it was good.